Boeing blew through $3.9 billion in cash in the first quarter, but it was better than the $4.4 billion that analysts estimated. Questions still circle around the embattled airplane manufacturer, including production quality, the search for a new CEO. Here to help us break it all down is Robert Spingarn, Managing Director of Aerospace, Defense, and Space at Melius Research. Thanks for being here, Robert. So when we look, it's interesting because initially there was a bit more of a positive reaction when it came to Boeing, maybe a little bit of relief. And then we saw that fade. What do you think sort of took over here? Just that the road is still going to be tough for Boeing?
Yeah, that's really all it is. I think people were long into the quarter expecting some positive news. The CEO gave a pretty positive, upbeat interview on television this morning before the earnings call. And then you get into the details in the earnings call and you see it's perhaps a little bit more complex a recovery story than it looked earlier in the day.
And Rob, it sounds like they're standing by their free cash flow target, $10 billion by 2026. Did that surprise you, Rob? They're going to stick by that bogey?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we reduced our number roughly a month ago. Think that that's a bit of a stretch to get to that 10 billion in 2026. The CEO said he thinks they can do it. The CFO, interestingly, suggested, at least to me, that maybe they hit that run rate toward the end of the year in 26, so maybe a little bit later. But they got to chop a lot of wood to get there.
Talk us through some of that chopping, right? I mean, we know a lot of the challenges that are in front of Boeing right now. What do you think is sort of most urgent and important for the company to accomplish this year, besides, finding a new guy to run the thing or woman?
Well, so there is that. But the two most important things are the 737 and 787 production rates. Those are the two cash cows in the commercial airplane business, and they need to stabilize those aircraft programs and raise those rates to generate cash. So again, the two cash cows. Then they have to improve the defense business. And that did come in a little better than expected today. So that was one of the positives. But it's still a negative cash flow business, and it's got to swing to positive by 2026 in order to hit that $10 billion number.
And Rob, I don't think I've had the chance to get your take on the Spirit acquisition either. In your opinion, smart move, Rob, positive for the business?
I think it's kind of inconsequential. We've taken the view that Boeing has wielded a lot of influence at Spirit since the spin nearly 20 years ago. They've had people in those factories for a couple of decades. They can ask Spirit to do the things they need them to do. So I don't think it's necessary that they have to own Spirit in order to get it to improve better. Yes, they can put them on common systems and so on, but they have plenty of access to Spirit the whole time. What really needs to happen is both Spirit and Boeing have to improve their operations, and they can do that separately or together.
What does the regulatory landscape look like right now for Boeing? What's still to come in terms of, consequences or new regulations put on the company?
Well, that's a little bit of an unknown. They're still under scrutiny for the tragic accidents that happened a few years back, and that is now being revisited. Some of the families are asking the government to reopen investigations, and we don't know how that will play out. We don't know if this incident with Alaska Air 1282 allows for the reopening of the deferred prosecution agreement from a few years ago. And then the other side of this is the FAA is simply going to mandate a certain level of increased scrutiny and oversight over Boeing's operations. And going forward, I'd like to think that scrutiny oversight will be consistent. It makes the environment, the industry safer for everybody. Boeing will adapt to it, so will the other aerospace companies, and that's a good thing.
And Rob, in terms of just kind of events coming up on the calendar, you do have that Farnborough Air Show, Rob, coming up. I think it's July. Is that important for Boeing at all?
Historically, the air shows, Farnborough in July and then alternating with Paris in June the next year, have been a great place for orders to materialize and for industry to get together. It's really about orders. That's been less important, I'd say, over the last decade. Having said that, though, because COVID canceled a couple of those shows, the last Paris Air Show was a big deal. Farnborough could be a big deal for orders this year, but I would say that that's more of a side event. Where the focus is going, the scrutiny is going to be at this point, where Boeing is concerned, is on getting those aircraft production rates stabilized and then raising them.
And so, Rob, maybe you're leading to my last question for you. You have a hold on the name, so you're on the sidelines. I'm just going to ask you, Rob, what kind of you're looking for? What would it take to get you more bullish on Boeing?
Well, exactly that. I want to see evidence they've really got their arms around these production rates and that they can raise them sustainably. There's been a lot of volatility month to month, quarter to quarter. We need to see these rates stabilized on an annual basis and the ability to move those up over the next couple of years toward those targets. And once we see that, we can get constructive. At the same time, we need to see improvement in the defense business, debt retired. And the other thing, I haven't mentioned it yet, we really do think the company needs to think about its next airplane. It is losing ground to Airbus. The longer that they wait to start a new aircraft, and that does preserve cash flow, but there's two sides to this coin. The longer that they wait to start on a new airplane, the more ground they potentially lose later on in the next decade.
Interesting. And they've obviously, to your point before, they've got a lot to do before they can get to that new plane. Rob, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.